Beat number 2. All right, so let's begin this process of explaining to you guys how to mix drums. How in the world do you even approach that? Where do we go? I wrote down some notes. I tried to take down some good notes of everybody who asked in the Twitch stream. And I got a little note thing here. So my goal is to answer these specific questions right here on the bottom. And I'm gonna just try and answer this. The basics of drum mixing. How do I get my drums to sound thicker and crispier? Someone mentioned Tame Impala, but I'm not Tame Impala, but I can tell you how to do thicker and crispier drums. How do you mix your drums so naturally to fit the sample? How do you get the kick drum bass line not to be muddy together? How about mixing drums if you use your phone or iPad? And what apps are best for mixing drums? Panning drums to mimic a realistic kit. Mixing and recording of a mic'd up kit. Individual kick, snare, hi-hat samples. Mixing touches you might put on a full drum loop sample. That's a good one. Specifics of compression and transient processing. It can be confusing. I definitely appreciate that question. And genre specific, how you go about mixing for different genres, or at least some general tips. Loudness and leveling. What decibel level all my drum samples be at? Kick, snare, hi-hat, etc. I want to answer your questions, which I will do right now. So, where should we begin? I could begin with saying this, okay? Now, we make music here on the Discord, right?
If you make music, drop a little emoji in the chat, please.
So, music, drums, instruments, these are all different components. And I'm gonna try and write all this down. Drums, instruments. An instrument is a tool that helps you convey a language. What does this language do? Tell a story. So, in everything that encompasses frequencies, okay? Drums, piano, bass, guitar, all these different instruments are all conduits to create a language. Sometimes languages and how you phrase or say things create a essence behind it. It creates the value of understanding the story or whatever someone's trying to say. So, a good question here in the very beginning. Mixing and recording of mic'd up drums. So what I'm gonna show you guys here, I have a kit, an actual drum set here. And just because we are live here on this Twitch stream, we're gonna start from the absolute bottom, okay? Let's just turn off all this processing. Let's work completely backwards and show you guys how to get, and this is free game. Free game. Record this moment. How to mix drums. As well, I'm making a guide for all those who are curious. I'm making a free guide based off of everything we're talking about here. So, in order to have a good drum sound, right, you first got to have good drums. What makes a drum sound good? Is it the fact that it sounds punchy? Does it sound clean? Does it sound crisp? Drums from a basic standpoint, right? And this is gonna sound really rough, but we're gonna work our way backwards, okay? We're gonna work our way backwards. So I'm gonna take all this little processing stuff off. I don't want none of it. Turn that off, turn it all off. Turn it all off. Take it off. All right, so let's even take the panning off, because someone did ask about how to pan your drums. How do you pan your drums? Man, well, so we are starting from the absolute bottom. When you got a drum, right? A drum essentially from scratch, and this is all from scratch. So every time you mix drums, you gotta have a reference point. And I'll tell you guys, my reference points have a reference point. My reference point whenever I make beats, and I'm gonna just turn over here to show you guys how it's gonna work. My reference point, when I play drums, I grew up playing drums in church. A lot of the music we played in church, aside from it being gospel, was funk and rockish fusion and neo soul. So you can only imagine what comes with the context of a genre. So certain genres, certain drums sound good in certain genres. It might work for the other genres, but that's only if you understand it and how it works. I know when it comes to neo soul, hip hop, it varies. Indie, it kind of bleeds into like an indie kind of overall underground kind of sound. My drum sound is inspired by the one and only Questlove. His drums, okay? His drums are tight but loose. And let me explain that. Tight in the way it sounds. Think about the word that I'm saying. Tight. It's strong on its attack, and whatever is around it, like the tone, is quick. It's tight. Tight. So that's my current drum set, and that's what I currently have. I understand it to be tight, and that's how I even tune the drums. From the snare, the toms, kick, even the cymbals and the percussions I add to it. Everything sounds tight. That's my approach, and that's what I would reference into having your own reference point. Tame Impala, for instance, if that's your reference point, his drums are thicker and crispier. So you're not gonna get the same result with a tight sounding snare drum. You might wanna get something a little bit thicker, a little more beefier. And beefier, beef is thick. Think about the references of how we describe music. Thick. You already get it. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna just turn on my microphones and have these drum mics on so you guys can hear what these drums sound like raw. And we're gonna work our way backwards. So first, have a reference point. Have a reference point for what you wanna hear. And can someone throw out a little BPM for me? If anybody wants to be so kind, throw out a BPM that you wanna hear with tight drums. The best BPM, which in most genres, 85, 86. I was about to say 86, but that's good. Park Breezy, 86, 85. Okay. Cool. So I'm gonna try and turn this camera over this way. You can't see what's right here, but I currently have a tom here. The tom is also recorded, but I don't have any cymbals here. I only got one here on my left. And so, yes. So this is basically the consensus. This is way better. I like this camera angle. But what we're gonna do is this. We're gonna basically pick a BPM and record a basic pattern. Now, when I gained my microphones as well, might I add, when I'm about to hit these drums and tell you guys how I gained it, all these microphones are a little bit different. The sensitivity of certain drums when you record them, sometimes it is best for tight attacking instruments like drums to have a dynamic microphone. That way you can capture the dynamics. You capture the dynamics with a dynamic microphone. These toms and this snare, along as the kick, all have dynamic microphones. The only microphones that don't have that kind of approach are the condensers for my overheads. So currently at this moment, you'll see on my session here, I have my kick, snare, tom 1, tom 2, mid microphone, and a left and a right that is basically creating a fake left and right. And I'll explain that after I record this this drum loop. So here we go. Let's get a BPM. We'll cut my mic real quick. All right. So I just recorded a little drum loop, and the idea is to break this entire thing down into its basics. Now, whenever I record drums, because drums are loud dynamics, they are crucially loud. Whenever you record your drums, I like to at best have my gain for all of my knobs to be sitting when I record at about -10. And if so, get a little less than that, because drums are loud. They're very, very loud. So we're gonna turn on the inputs, turn off the inputs so we can hear what these drums sound like raw. So I will also definitely say, so we're just gonna break down each. I'm gonna break down this whole thing. You can even see here on the kick. Even though the kick is like the loudest thing I got, I try to like work my way from down up. Yeah, keep it so you can have some headroom. So we're gonna go -10. We're gonna select all these and just kind of lower these a little bit. The more now, and that's only for headroom, so you can control what you got. I'm gonna just hit -10. And then hit -10 right here. We're gonna do -10 on all these tracks. And it's really just to balance it out. So you can balance your entire session for the drums. Ooh. I'm already liking the fact that I got mad headroom right now. So let's just look at the proper level of all these drums right now. Let's see how high this is. It's a -24. That's cool. We're gonna boost this signal then. Boost all of it. Now, my approach is to get everything at a unity level. Keep your mids, your sides, all that. Keep all that consistent. Especially when it comes to your sides and your mids, making sure those are just all sitting in the same kind of like level. But now you can see I got enough room to kind of just turn things up, turn things down. Even with the toms, I can like boost those a little bit. I got enough control for it. And just so I don't sound like a terrible drummer or anything, I want to make sure I'm on time. And this is something I'll also definitely say. Pocket and landing on a 1 is crucial. It's very crucial. That's just another thing though. But to answer your question, what dB should all my drum elements be? Kick, snare. I think left side R on 0. Oh, let's see here. My bad. 10, -10. So yeah, what dB should all of my drum elements be at? Kick, snare, hi-hat. Keep them at Unity. Recording at -10 dB allows you enough headroom to boost your sound. All right, so that's one. that's one question answered. I'm gonna try to answer all the rest of them. Mixing a recording of a mic'd kit. Yeah, all right. So we're just gonna knock all these out. So let's begin with the first component of mixing drums. Leveling is important. So I'm a drummer that likes my kicks first. It really depends on the genre of music you're and actually answering it. This is one of the questions. How do you go about mixing for different genres, trap, R&B, indie, at least some general tips? Each genre has rules of its language that make it a genre. So when it comes to something like R&B, neo soul, the rules for hip hop, R&B, jazz sometimes is having some drums that are quick and kind of like, it kind of skates. The sounds sound quick and they're like not a distraction. Calling it yeah, it is language. It really is. So even with these drums, it's basically another form of language. But each genre has a rule, and these rules create the genre. If you can understand the rules of how the genre works, you can then apply it, i.e., to something like your drum mixing. Everybody knows in reggaeton, there are some massive kicks and a certain pattern that you have to use to make it reggaeton, okay? So in this context, the rule book here, because it's more like a fusion-y, jazzy, funky energy. So I want my drums to be kick. So that means quick. So that means the kick is gonna be quick. And I hope this is making sense. So keep the kick in the front. And make this a stereo. Wonder why it's a left and a right. All right. And I'll explain this later. So we got our kick, got our snare, make sure all that is sitting just kind of like in its way. So this isn't, we're not even talking about like, I love these hard hitting kicks, but also I love kicks that have like a 60s that didn't hit that car. Yeah, because that was, back then it wasn't about bass, it was about clarity. That's where the sounds and sonics have changed a little bit with music. But genres, there are certain genres that do that. So I'm gonna just say here, each genre has a rule of its language that make it a genre. If you can understand the rules of the genre, whether it be that trap has 808s, has banging 808s, and trap hi-hats, and typically sits in a BPM of 130, 65, 70, 75. Then you can apply it to everything. So that's another question. I hope that made sense. I'm gonna use the AI to like clean it all up. So mixing, recording of the drums. Individual kick, snare, panning drums to mimic realistic kit. We'll get there. Clarity. I'm gonna just say clarity. Mixing with clarity. Mixing to hear everything in a clarity way. All components of the drums can be fully heard. All right, so before we get into the dibble and dabble thing, we're just gonna kind of boost this thing a little bit. So I'm also gonna say too, tuning in the drums to the track, it works sometimes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's more like I like the natural element of it. That's if you really wanna like cheat sheet it. And even too, like even when you hear the snare, my snare microphone has a bleed of the hi-hat. Sometimes it's best to just use that. So we're just gonna boost that a little bit. And actually like that. We're gonna turn up those toms a little bit. Turn up the toms and just work our way up. Hey Siri, set a timer for 20 minutes. Perfect. All right, so this little trick here, if you guys see these little tracks right here, it says mid, side, left, side, right. In a way that I can explain this that makes sense, because I sometimes have trouble explaining things. Let's go to ChatGPT. How would you explain mid-side miking technique simply for Discord? For my Twitch stream. Basic explanation. All right. Mid-side technique is a stereo recording method that captures the depth of spatial characters of sound source. It's basically using, and I have a cardioid mic that is in a polar pattern of a figure 8. So if you guys ever seen that, like the number 8, it's picking up the polar patterns of both the back and the front of the microphone. And what I currently did was I took my microphone. I'll even show you guys too. So I took the microphone and I basically put a basic condenser right on top of it. And I'll zoom in so you guys can see it. Let's see here, zoom right here and then boop. You guys see that? See how like, oh, zoom right. I'm gonna zoom out. Y'all see that microphone? See how it's like, you can see the cardioid mic like right there. And then there's a normal condenser right below it. So it's picking up the polar pattern of the left and the right. And simply, all I'm doing is taking that configuration of the microphones and position them close as possible. Now the trick is this. You don't just simply pan the mid mic to the center and the side mics left and right. Instead, you duplicate the side track and flip the phase on the duplicated track. So what I currently have here, so you guys can see how I'm doing these like stereo recordings. I have a left here, and I have a right. Though both of these tracks are the same track, but one just has a totally different polar pattern than the other. And so when you turn them on, mono, left, right, all you gotta do is hit left and hit right. Now you hear stereo. And to answer that question about how to mic drums, I start from the rooms and work backwards. So instead of it being like mad wide, I can like kind of approach it in a way where I'm not making the sound so wide where it cancels out. Because that can be a problem. But how to basically mix the panning drums in a realistic kit. Think about how you look at a drum kit. Like if you look at a drum kit standing at it, right? And I'm gonna show you guys. Think about how you look at a drum kit. When you look at a drum kit, you typically see, as for a right-handed drummer, you see the hi-hat on the left. You see a snare right in the middle, kick right dead in the center, but the toms are probably gonna be on your left. The first tom's probably gonna be on the left. So it's gonna be like, and then the right tom's gonna be on the right. And they're not always like on the far right, but it does seem like it's like opposite. So that's where like the customization can be a kind of cool a little bit. So picture yourself sitting at a drum kit and what you would typically see on your left, on your right, and your cymbals. Your cymbals, these cymbals, specifically this room, are the side left and the side right. So we're gonna do the toms and treat it the same way if we were sitting at the drum kit. So I'm gonna hit left for the left, -25, and I'll do +25. And that's enough to push it to a certain direction without being overly dramatic. Because back in the 60s, they didn't know how to pan drums, man. That was a whole nother thing. All right, so when it comes to panning drums to mimic a realistic kit, approach it from the perspective of you sitting at a drum set. They were all on like the left side and the vocals be all on the right. Like they didn't understand it at all. Kick in the middle, snare in the middle. Overheads are stereo. Think about sitting at a drum kit and panning it the way you see it. All right, so we're knocking out these questions, man. We're knocking out all of these questions. So mixing individual kick snare samples. Now this is where we slowly start to go from leveling, because the leveling is pretty good right now on the drums. I can hear all the components. I can hear everything. Now this is where the cool component comes into. When it comes to mixing, my approach for mixing drums are 3 things. And this is simply like just basic taking a signal and figuring out what's next to do to it. So you have a kick, and this is something that my instructor from Full Sail taught me. All instruments, and I'm gonna stop this for a second. All instruments have a fundamental. A kick drum sounds like a kick drum. A snare sounds like a snare. Toms sound like a tom. What does that mean? All these individual components of the drum harbor a frequency that sounds like what it is. A snare drum is not a kick drum. A kick drum is not a bass drum. Toms. It's also not a cymbal. This snare's fundamental of how the frequencies are only this instrument, nothing else. So when you mix a kick drum, for instance, I have a kick drum here, and all I'm gonna do is just play this on loop again. Let's just mute all this. Notice how you hear the hi-hat kind of chilling in the recording. Don't use that as like a fundamental frequency. when we approach mixing drums, and whenever you approach mixing drums, there's a fundamental. Kick drums are low. They're low, and they got some punch. So that means if the frequency that you're hearing is playing that means anything else, you need to get rid of it. And I'll show you how. And don't even look at this. Don't even look at this EQ. I'm gonna fix that. So, off rip, kick drums. How do you mix a kick drum? I'll show you. And this exact same rule is how we're gonna approach it for everything. Thankfully, right now we have something called a spectrum analyzer that can show us what frequency these kicks this sound is giving us. The fundamental of a kick drum is right here. See that consistent shape? That's what makes a kick drum a kick drum. It deciphers what this is. So my instructor taught me, if it is a kick drum, then leave it. If it isn't, you need to get rid of it. Not necessarily delete it, but disguise it where you don't notice it. So you hear this, right? When people be mixing kicks, they be like, oh yeah, let me just boost the bass. But notice it's not giving us what we need. It's not sounding clean. It just sounds boomier, which is cool. But this is what you want to do. And this is how I approach it. Find where the punch of your kick is. See that? You hear that little punchiness? It's a little after the 100 mark. It's probably sitting around like 200 frequencies, 200, 300, right here, and drop it. Notice how different that sounds. I'll turn it off and turn it off again. Turn it on again. You notice that? I'm gonna make sure it's a little fine tuned. So so when you mix drums, do addition by subtracting what you don't need first. Get rid of what you don't need, because this kick drum, just like a snare drum, just like any other instrument, has a fundamental. The fundamental of how it works, how it makes that sound. Get rid of what is not the fundamental. Get rid of what is not a kick drum. This is not a kick drum. Maybe in certain styles, yes, but I want a big boomy kick. I want a big, yes. Yes. Does that make sense? There's a fundamental for your instrument. You sometimes need it and you sometimes don't. Get rid of what you don't need so you can boost everything else you want later. Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. Get rid of the frequencies that don't sound like a kick drum. Like, this is not a kick drum. Like, even listen to it. That's not a kick drum. When you get rid of it, it's a little clearer. It doesn't sound all muddy. You're not hearing anything else except for that low end. That low end and that little punch. Shout out to Dawes. So, yes, remove what you don't need. Even this, the common human ear does not hear anything below 20 hertz. So we're gonna do a hard cutoff. Just a hard cutoff. Now that we got what we need, let's boost what we don't have. A little bit of a boost. Notice that? We don't have that little, that little thing on the flat when you hit a kick drum? It sounds like paper, but it makes it sound like right here. It's that little frequency. That, you need that. You definitely need that. Now, using the same approach for your frequencies, your snare drums typically sit in a certain frequency. Let's reset this too. Because this microphone is only picking up a certain level of frequencies, we gotta listen to what the mic has. Now, this is a great example. For kicks. And this is what I'm gonna type out. For kicks, there are fundamentals of frequencies. And I remember when they taught me about the fundamental of an instrument, there's a way that frequencies work. If you keep the way that frequencies work, you could just boost everything that you don't have. That's why equalizer exists. You can equal out the frequencies. So for kicks, there are fundamental frequencies. You have a lower frequency. Let's see where this kick is sitting. I'm gonna have this up on as a free download. Let's see where the boost is coming from. Somewhere between 100 all the way to like 20. 100 to like 30 hertz. You have lower frequencies that sit between 30 hertz to 70 hertz. Not 70, 100. 100 hertz. Keep that. You have a clarity frequency that sits somewhere between what is that frequency we boosted? Between 1K and 1K hertz, 1 kilohertz and 3 kilohertz. One kilohertz. What you don't need is the frequencies sitting somewhere, and I'm really writing this out for y'all, somewhere between 150 and 40 hertz. 140 and 400 hertz. Notch, EQ, and lower the gain on those frequencies. Yep. And you do the same thing with the snare. The snare has a fundamental too. So this is a great example. Kaelin, what if I have a bad microphone? What if I have a bad microphone that's picking up something that's not the frequency of the snare? A good example here is this. Y'all see this? Y'all see this? Y'all see this little harsh little 5 kilohertz frequency? What we're gonna do is not use that. It's so annoying. It's like, we're gonna tuck that. Now, I'm gonna answer you a question real quick because I know someone's gonna ask. Gate. Don't you just gate the frequencies? Don't you just gate it? Don't you just gate like all that so you can control a little better? I'm gonna tell you a problem you're gonna come across. You're gonna come across the fact that gates are imperfect processors. I used to think if I put a gate on a snare, it would completely rid me of having to go back and not deal with the audio that was like opposite of a snare drum. So like, let's say I want to gate the snare, but I'm getting the hi-hat too. The trick is you use it. Just make it subdued. Like camouflage it enough where it doesn't sound like a bad recording. If you get a good enough recording and duck the frequencies that are not there, a gate isn't gonna fix your problems. Perfect masking is gonna remove all that issue. So this microphone picks up the hi-hat frequencies. So it's not just getting the fundamental of the snare, it's getting the fundamental of the hi-hat. And you hear how crazy that is? This is so uncomfortable. So what we gonna do is we gonna find it and get rid of it. Now all we got is a snare here that's sitting a little after 100, 120, 130 frequencies. There we go. So we're gonna do the EQ here. And now this is something that I like to do. When it comes to drums, I like to shape my drums to sound like something that doesn't exist. As an example, see how the snare? See how the snare like has this little thing right here? It just sounds kind of thin. Well, what happens if something's a little thin? It doesn't have enough oomph on it. It doesn't have enough to it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna boost that frequency. You hear that? Now comparing that to this, terrible. I just cleared it up a little bit. Now we combine it with the kick, we're getting there. And do the same thing with the toms. Now toms are a little more easier. Toms are just like kick drums. So just take what you need and get rid of what you don't need. So keep everything what you need in its place, but remove what you don't need. You seeing a pattern here, y'all? I hope you're catching it. Is this making any sense for you guys? Drop some emojis in the chat if this makes any sense to you guys. For snares, and I'm gonna write that thing down too. For snares, there is a fundamental. That sounds like Fanta. Fanta, don't you wanna? There is a fundamental of a snare drum. My snares microphone. My snare drum microphone picks up some heavy frequencies. Picks up some heavy frequencies in the, 5K range? That was really extreme. In the higher 5K 0.8 kilohertz. Hertz range. I notch EQ those frequencies we don't need. shelve the frequencies after. Shelve the frequencies before 130 hertz. If it sounds too thin, boost the desired frequency. Like, what was the frequency I boosted? 204 hertz. 204 hertz. Cool. And we're just gonna apply the same thing for the toms. So the toms have a fundamental too. Turn that off, because I'll show you guys what to do. Now, also, might I preface this, and I'm gonna say this. Everything you mix, because I didn't add this. Everything you mix needs a saturator. What this is gonna do is take what you currently have created with your harmonics. The saturator is a way that you can boost the harmonics and preserve your signal and sound to still sound cool, but you can control your levels outside of gain and outside of your mixing volume knobs. A saturator also does that for you. So it takes whatever frequencies you've equalized or gotten rid of and the frequencies you kept, and it just kind of enhances it where it sounds a little more sharper. It's like throwing a little bit of hot sauce on your favorite chicken, and you notice that the chicken just went from like normal chicken to like a little bit of a spice to it. So see how if you take away the saturation, it goes from that normal basic signal to, as well, soft clip your drums if you want a certain level of like proper, and even how like you just heard that little plosive on the microphone. There's some about that plosive where it adds the additional harmonic that gives it the right amount of distortion. There's good distortion and there's bad distortion. There's clipping distortion, which in the right context will sound good. And even here, I'm gonna do the same thing to the kick. I didn't even add the saturator to the kick. So saturate everything on your drums. Everything is like, and there's different types of saturators. There's saturators that are emulating like analog software. There's analog clips that emulate like a soft sine wave, kind of like slightly distorting it. And then it gets a little more, the knock plugin is a great example of it because it has the right amount of like breaking the rule that it is too distorted, and it's not. Something you could look up if you're curious is that Dr. Dre's drums in The Chronic and the 2001 album all were saturated to like the perfect level before it distorted. That's why his drums knock. It just sounds like you're getting like hit a certain way, but it's not distorted. It's just perfectly perfect. This is perfectly leveled enough to be distorted and clean. A soft clipper does that. It's like your saturation helps you achieve that sound. So, and I'll even do that here. See that? See that little medium curve did that? Now we're getting upset. We're getting there, getting somewhere. And I'm gonna drop these drums for the free on the Discord. Same thing with the toms. And this one has a gate too. Now, the only way you would use a gate is if you have instruments that you don't play often. So toms, Gates would probably come a little after that EQ. And I'll tell you why. Toms usually have like lower end frequencies, just like a kick drum. And if you don't gate those, that gate is just gonna be, it's gonna pick up all the other loud stuff on the microphone. So my approach is to keep the gate after an EQ for the toms. Treat it just like a kick drum. The same way you would do a kick drum. If you want to get into the little nook and cranny and get rid of these other frequencies, you can. But you don't have to. I like to just keep it there. And we're gonna put a saturator on that too. And do the same thing. Just work our way all the way down. And notice I haven't even added anything else to these drums. Let's change the groove up a little bit. Now I haven't even added like any of the stereo imaging to this. No, I don't actually mess with the master chain until I get the drums in a good place. And I'll tell you exactly why. The reason why is because your master volume is gonna affect your master processing is affecting the entire mix. I wanna have complete control over everything. Sometimes it's best to just have like a pre-master and your master kind of like sitting, so you can like A-B it. You can like tweak as you go. You can tweak as you go, but I hope that makes sense. That's literally how you mix. And I haven't added anything else crazy. Now this is where the cool stuff comes in. We're gonna add a little bit of the imaging in there. And let's boost the signal a little bit on these because they're a little quiet. Because if I were to just do this, it's cool. But I want to be able to affect the wave too. Because the overheads and the sides and the mids aren't that loud. So let's just boost that a little bit. Now I can just boost this over here. I like to have a good little blend of both. And when it comes to the mids, and you'll even hear how different it sounds. Now this mid and the sides are only capturing the room. So mid is the room. And everything is about balancing everything out. So I hope that answers your question, Judah. Apply the same with overhead, with toms and overheads. Now with the overheads, you can do two things. You can either, okay, so I'll say this to keep it sweet and understandable. When you get to your overheads, right? Someone said, and I want to make sure I'm answering this right. MB compression and transients processing always confuse me. We're gonna get to that in a second. How do you get your drums to sound thicker and crispier? All right, here we go. The saturator is a good portion to that. Saturation is key, but it's also having the right amount of drums. So I'm someone that likes to get all the little nooks and crannies out of the way so you can have fun later. And I'll show you guys what that means. Every single bit of these little small edits create depth to how far you want your drums to sound. Do you want them to sound big and boomy? Do you want to sound like they're just playing in a room? Because right now it just sounds like a clean room recording. So one of the things that I did learn when I was in college, and I realized gospel music does this. Gospel music, they take the kick drum and side chain it to the overheads. Why? Why do you ask? In most cases, if you're mixing drums, they typically preserve the space so the kick sounds bigger. That's why they would sidechain the kick to the overhead. So the kick drum sounds massive. It sounds like you're hearing a big boom, and it's not just a sound that sits there. It makes the cymbal sound even more impactful and dramatic. No cymbal sounds casually like that in a normal setting if you listen to a real drum set. So yeah, they do it in metal, they do it in rock. It's the best way to clear space so your kick drum has space. So let's see here. We're gonna do a little slight compression side chaining with the kick. Now this is all kind of acquired taste, but it creates space. I kind of like to just pump it. And when I mean pump it, like crank everything super hard and dial it back. Even with the mid. Side chaining. The side chain to the kick. Now hear how everything sounds cohesive? I actually kind of like how pumpy it is. Now this is where the fun part begins. I had something earlier that I put on my kick drum, and this is all just kind of boosting at this point. We're just kind of boosting the signal. Over here, you got this thing I like to call kick tight. You do that on the hats as well, or just the overheads? If you have an overhead specifically, I do that too for the hi-hat. Do it for every bit of overhead information that doesn't sound like your snare or your kick or your toms. If it doesn't sound like a kick, snare, or a tom, sidechain that bad boy. You will gladly appreciate how much more space you have. It just really depends on your taste, but this is just creating a really, and this is good, I'm basically just creating as thick of a drum loop as possible. That's the goal. So this thing here I have is called Kick Tight. It's a preset on Ableton called Corpus. And Kick Tight is one of my favorites because it basically creates another shape of a drum. It creates like a drum inside of a drum. So it'll like take what you give it as like a signal and turn it into something that is even more physical to shape. So you can shape like a kick to sound rounder. You can make it sound loose, make it sound even medium. You can use this to like create like a physical model sound. Like you can use it to shape it and make the sound you have even more dramatic. So this kick drum is gonna go from here to this. Hear that little umph? Let me even hear this on the speakers. Let me hear this on the speakers real quick. So we got to turn that tom down a little bit. And it's all about balance. Sometimes the toms might be a little too loud. Sometimes the kick and the snare might not be a little level. So let's boost the snare a little bit. Now I can balance it out a little more because things are a little too quiet. Things are a little too loud. And just kind of play that game. Play the game of turning things down. I haven't even showed y'all the little processing thing I like to do with the drums too. So everything is pretty much in a good space. Now this is where my fun little parts come in. And I'm gonna try and stop me if this isn't making any sense. How to get my drums to sound thicker and crispier. Dramatize your sounds with saturation and clear out frequencies you don't need. How to get the kick drum based on... And to answer your question about mixing drums, if you use your iPhone or iPad, so there aren't many... That mic screech would be a nice, purposeful mess up. I would never expect that screech as a fill. It's a pretty good way to do it. Use... That's my niece like screaming right now. Use the fundamentals. Use the fundamentals of your sounds. Now, I'm pretty sure someone's gonna ask, hey, work from there. So someone's gonna ask, I know someone's gonna ask, what am I missing? I'm missing something. I know I'm missing something. So the fundamental, saturator, dramatize your sound, processing. Oh, mixing on an iPhone. Okay, so mixing on an iPhone, I'll be honest, when it comes to mixing on the iPhone, because you do have some options regarding mixing your drums, but I think for the best results, you're gonna be at mercy of how good the apps are. So I know FL Studio has one, Logic has one. There's an app I used to use called Caustic 3. I used to use that to mix my stuff because it had every little thing you need. But your best bet when it comes to using your phone or your iPad is to have good sounds. How do you know if your sounds are good? Have good sounds. They are clear and knock. Otherwise, you are gonna have a really, really difficult time trying to mix and you don't want to mix bad. That's why Steve Lacy used to rent a studio and have the music come off of his iPhone and then mix his record off of the studio speakers. He just needed a space to hear his sounds. Tough experience. All right, so boom. All right, and we're slowly knocking out this whole list, y'all. Hope this is making sense. Boo, 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 boo. All right, so how do I drum processing? So I won't even spend too much time on this. There are tons of different drum processors out there. You might have, you could use RC20 and just cheat code it. That's cool. But I like to layer my processes. Now, there's guys that specifically get into the details of the nitty gritty, and I keep going with the rest of this drum break. Let's keep that going. And because this is kind of like a funk jazz neo soul fusion, and even this, I didn't even turn on the EQs for these, so let me go and redo that. Reset all gains. So I need to have the EQs and the saturator for this. Even the tom has a frequency, the fundamental you want to use. That is necessary. Let's hit that medium curve. Let's make that even clearer. yeah, so now I could really get rid of these too, but I'm not even using like my eyes, I'm using my ears at this point. And really that's just because I know the fundamentals of the drums. If you understand the fundamental, you can do this without thinking about it. I came a bit late. Is this regards to loud drums or just applicable to one shots as well? It's applicable to anything with drums. Sometimes your drums might be mixed. Sometimes you need to get a little better mix. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But I do this to all my one shots too. Even though I've like dropped stuff, I don't just be using stuff raw. I be mixing it too. I mix everything. Saturator goes on everything, despite the fact that it's on a sound pack or anything. All right, cool. Cool. So now that we got all these drums, all kind of mixed down to a certain way, everything is just working our way up. And I'll definitely say this too, this is gonna be mad controversial. What I'm about to say is about to be very controversial. There was a guy years ago that said that red means clipping. I'd like to challenge that and say, yes, but if you can get it at the right element where it stylistically sounds like this. One issue I get from Foley recordings is wind and saving process drums versus raw. That makes sense. So that means when it comes to Foley recordings, you have to kind of think ahead. Think ahead of like whatever kind of like sounds that you're gonna get around it. And if you can't get around those sounds, use it as a texture. Use it as a texture. Now something that Count is a master at using stuff that is not drum to make it a drum. It's crazy. His texture game is like goated amongst anybody I've ever seen work. He'll use a scrape if it sounds dope. Like if someone's just like, they brush the microphone just a little too hard. Like he'll use it. He'll use it if it sounds good. But he's all about getting a good recording. So if you can get a good recordings save you a lot of trouble in the end. So that is also something I'm gonna add too. Good recordings. Good recordings will save you tons of trouble in the end. And I'll elaborate more on that as the time goes on. So we got all this stuff here. I'm gonna just tell y'all, I have a certain approach when it comes to drums. My approach when it comes to like even something like this, right? I got all the little nuances. I'm using the right amount of like clipping. And I'm actually about to do a little soft clip on this kick real quick. There we go. Now watch this. There are tons of things you can throw on drums. This is kind of like a little experimentation at this point. You can get a little EQ. So if you want to see the spectrum of your drums, everything sounds pretty clean. My personal thing I like to do is get the clarity of the kit. Take the brights and kind of like tweak them a little bit and turn down the snare. And this is just gonna be a lot of A-B action going on at this point. Even this too, we gotta turn this down. There we go. And just kind of tweak as we go. Saturate it too. Is it okay to put a limiter at the end of your chain and drive the gain a bit to clip the drums? That's what a soft clip is for. That's what I currently have on everything right now. I got a soft clip running through this saturator. That's why you don't see these drums clipping. It's like barely noticeable. I'm gonna show you guys something even cooler than that. This is where the experimentation comes from. I kind of just experiment and free ball at this point. Let's just do, turn that down. Yeah, soft clipper sounds way better. Trust me. You don't have to use a limiter on everything. If you want to, definitely use a soft clipper. That's crazy. Now, the best part. Guitar rig. Let's experiment. Let's find some presets. My favorite preset whenever I put drums on anything, and I'm gonna put this down. Use a plugin that you wouldn't expect. Use a plugin you would not expect, okay? So, drum processing. Use an effect that boosts everything you just did and work down by easing it into your sound. So basically, it's gonna be up on the stream, and I'm gonna have this thing. This whole thing is about to be which wave for your saturator do you generally use? I typically use medium curve to soft sine. Those are like the most delicate ones to keep it as natural. But if you want your joints to sound punchier and crispy, make sure that medium curve is working. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna go to a certain preset that I love putting on all my drums. See if I go to W. Wide Lo-Fi Master. Look at this. Let's A-B it. It takes what you currently did as a little 4.1 kilohertz frequency with 16 bits of depth and just kind of like takes the high end like right off of it. And sometimes I might just stack. I might just stack a whole thing on this. See how it's got saturation here? We're gonna like ease back on that. Play around with it. See what works for you. Now the best part. Don't knock on top of this. Oh, matter of fact, before that, we were talking about tight drums earlier, right? And someone did ask, megabyte MB compression and transient processing always confuse me. So compressors allow you to control your dynamics. If you want consistent levels when you mix. Crank your compressor. And actually, you know what? Let's even break down what a compressor is. Let's break down what a compressor is. Crank that. Let's just talk about it real quick, because I feel like I haven't said anything about it yet. So a compressor typically takes that dynamic range and just controls the dynamic. You can control the attack, the release of how soon that compressor is letting go of the dynamic. And there's a ratio, the ratio between the input and output levels of your signal. This is also something I kind of like do as a stylistic thing. You don't have to have it on certain levels. The more delicate your signals are, the larger you want the ratio to be. If you got something really like quick and you got to control it, lower that ratio if you want to have quicker controls. Because sometimes people that talk like this, even with my voice is moving pretty quick. So the ratio is kind of low to make my voice sound as consistently compressed. That's why you can hear my niece in the back screaming. There's a ratio factor here that's controlling how often that signal is coming in and the output of it. You know, you could ease it back, make it kind of like a delicacy where you barely notice it, or you could crank that. So that's just one of my approaches. That's how I approach compressors. Approach compressors to control your dynamics. Now, transients are more so for controlling not just the dynamic, but how hard your dynamic comes in. Whether you want punchy drums, or felt drums. A transient shaper allows you to control both. Appreciate the subscription, buddy. Yeah. So I hope that answers that question. Yeah. So, boo-doo-doo-doo, boop-ba-doo-boop. Yeah. So there's that question. Experiment. And hey, appreciate the subscription. And aim for effects that boost what you already did and make it dramatic. Wide lo-fi master preset on my drum kit from Guitar Rig 6 does that for me. Okay. All right. So we're slowly getting down to the nitty-gritty. I haven't even touched the kick drum and bass line thing. So we're already there. So back to the transient. I have a little DS shaper. The DS shaper is from Excellent Audio. And Excellent Audio is a great tool. It's one of many. Ableton has drum bus, but I've been using DS10 because I just want to preserve the actual sound, like the tone and the sound of the transient. I don't want to change the transient or anything. I just want to keep it as simple as possible. And what I did was I created like a little preset here on Ableton, basically having all the things that you can map out right here. So my favorite thing I like to do is to take the sustain out of the drums. And the sustain is basically a little envelope that allows you to keep the tail end of all your transients. But if you get rid of that, you don't have any sustain. It's just quick sounding drums. And I'll show you guys what I mean. It kind of acts like a compressor where it kind of expands your sounds to be louder, or it can get rid of it to make it sound like there's no tail. There's no sustain to it. So peep this. You hear the room and everything, right? Now watch this. See that? I kind of want to use that. That's gonna be our That's gonna be our drum break. All right, so to go back to the Discord and find our sample, Andrew dropped, rock drums, metal drums. They all have that like approach where if you want to expand your sustain, it's just like an expander. It expands. There's specifically plugins that expand samples.
Last year, didn't know what to do. I knew that I was missing you. Everything was up in the air.
Ooh.
Every little thing you said always went straight to my head.
That's
I
fire.
didn't really know what you meant. And then you called him up. You said he's just a friend.
Ooh.
But why did it have to end like this in the end? Oh, in the end.
Ooh.
Always on my mind.
That's fire. Let's find something that can. We're gonna make a whole beat off of this. I'm still gonna do my 3. I don't care. I don't care if it's a 3-hour stream. I haven't done a 9 p.m. stream in a minute. That sounds cool. We are using that 2-0. We still making them 3 beats today. Get the people who be on a late night Twitch stream to be like, hey, yo. All right. So let's just put this here. I'm gonna speed this up. And I'm gonna go over here. So I hope that makes sense regarding drum mixing. And I'm gonna actually answer these last 2. I'm gonna do a little AU pitch on this. And to answer your question, mixing touches that you might put on a full drum loop, how to get on a drum loop, kick drum and bass line not to be muddy together. Not to be muddy together. So we're gonna try something. We're gonna turn this down. We're gonna pitch this down. AU pitch it. Actually like that. I like to do is make sure the drums match the swing of the sample, or vice versa. We're gonna put this right here. And this is the cool thing about recording drums. You can just go back and just play around with it like a sample. depends on how I record it. Uh, 50. Let's put that at 50 cents, 50 cents. Ooh, that's cool. Record that one more time. That was really cool. Let me delete this little thing with jigger my bobber. And I'm gonna drop that out. Boop, boop, boop. And to answer your question, Ableton Live Loops are way better than Logic, but I combine my RC 505 cycle recordings to do it. It really just depends on how you work it. Because if you can get your loops to be consistent, because Count uses Logic like crazy. I haven't talked to him in a minute, by the way. But to answer your question, how to get the kick drum and bass line to not be muddy together. So this is the trick. Your kick, notice how like they're still low end, but it's not too distracting. That means your kick drum and your bass someone has to give up their spot. Okay? Someone has to give up their place. Do you want a track with a punchy kick drum? Or do you want your bass line to be what's harboring that lower end frequency? So you have to pick and choose which one do you, and this is without using side chaining, because as far as I know, Kenny Beats hates sidechain compression on 808s. If you want to preserve your 808, and I'm gonna write this down, one has to be the king of its throne. Has to be the king of its throne. Either the kick has the space and the bass plays a supporting role, or yeah, y'all didn't see that video? Kenny was like, yo, man, why are you sidechaining 808s? And the bass plays a supporting role, or the bass holds the space and the kick is quick and out of the way each time it hits. One preferably has to hold space. You can't have the sub and the kick playing the same frequency. Can't have the sub, bass, and the kick play the same frequency. This requires removing the fundamental. This requires using the fundamental to let something have space. So in this case, the low end bass, this bass holds a space, but the kick is just punching right there, and it's enough low end to not sound like it's. The kick doesn't sound like it's in the way of the bass, and the bass doesn't sound like it's in the way of the kick. They both harbor two totally different spaces. That's because one is dominating and the other one is playing a supporting role. And you can do it either like this. It really just depends on how you want to approach it. So you can either do it like this. Let's remove the low end. If you want the kick to be like punching, this is just kind of like a stylistic thing. It really just depends on what sounds better. Do you tune the kick to the third or the fifth of the scale? No, when it comes to tighter drums, you don't really. It's not really noticeable. I mean, it is an added plus, but it's not necessary. And I'll even show you right here. Unless you have like this kick drum hit that frequency, you won't necessarily need that little 808. So. But you're not really gonna do. For me, stylistically, I like to let these drums kind of breathe. I like the drums to like knock a little bit. Oh, and to answer your question, because I'm answering two questions right now. Mixing touches, you might put on a full drum loop sample. Slight knock. Exaggerate your effect and lower it by 20, by 80%. That way it's not overbearing, because I could easily be like, oh, let's go to the breakbeat dirty, but this is gonna sound too messy. It sounds tough, but I don't want it to be that. I want it to be just enough. Just enough. Maybe I'd say like 42%. But it's all according to taste. I try to tune the kick to the key of whatever we're in. Whatever that main note is or that main tone, tune your kick to that. But because this kick drum is so quick, you don't necessarily need it. We can actually hear this on the speakers real quick. And that, I think, covers everything. I just answered all of y'all's questions. So that's my approach. How did I learn all of this? I'll tell you how I learned all this. How I learned all of this. I took a 2-year course at Full Sail University. Don't do what I did. I paid too much money for that. Full Sail University. I took a 2-year course at Full Sail University in recording arts of science. I have my bachelor's in recording arts of science. That's honestly next. And so, yes, if you're curious to know if I will be putting this video up on the internet, I will. I will. And not only will I do that, I'll take this exact same guide. I'll have the AI take it and clean it up. Clean it all up and put it into a document. So this is beat number 1.